All right. We'll get started. Normally, my name is Zane Dunham. I'm with the county, and what we normally do is we start at that end, we go around the horseshoe, we introduce ourselves, and say who we're with, and then we'll introduce everybody online, and then we'll get started with the agenda. Amy Bertollet Hyman with the City of Waco's normally the chairman and runs this, but she's delayed, so I will get us started off. So Arthur, do you want to start?
Yes.
And we'll go back behind you.
Arthur Chambers, Waco MPO.
Ralph May with the City of Resource City Council.
Bill Barker, City of Reese City Council. Brett Lane, Textile Planning Program. Mixed in City of Woodward.
Wait, the guy goes Textile. I'm selling that assistant we need to bring the office fixed up. Like Norman operating budget for utilities in the city.
Able of textile transportation planning. And then city relation like you worship.
I'm a guest member with Waco Planning Program.
And I said, I'm Zane Dunham, I'm county engineer.
Eric Kaufman with the City of Waco. Real estate development. Patrick Lake, City of Waco, worship protection. Mark Healy, City of Waco, watershed protection.
Tim Devlin, assistant city manager, city.
Or Roy Waco MPO. Daniela Gallegos, Waco MPO.
All right, and I saw Jennifer walk in. Jennifer, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, we all waiting on
We were.
me. Hi, Jennifer Bowen with STV, civil engineering, just here to see what y'all have to do today.
Thank you. Arthur, do we have anybody online?
Yes, Laura Wagstaff is online.
Okay, welcome, Laura. Thank you all. We know your time is valuable, so we will get right to it. Agenda item number 1 is to review, discussion, and action regarding a recommendation to the policy board to solicit public comments concerning the 2025 through 2028 transportation improvement program, otherwise known as the TIP.
Good afternoon. So we have, before we get into this, we also put our agenda items in a QR code. So if you need to scan it, you're welcome to it. You're going to put that slide. The one right that. Yes, that one. So we decided some of you may not have copies. Also brings you all the agenda items, the slides, and all the related documents, all of that can be accessed. Let's get to the tip. The important part I wanted to mention is, so we had a meeting right after the last TIP meet, last attack meeting with the TxDOT's TIP division, and it became clear that we needed to get started on the TIP as soon as possible, which was, so it sped up our process quite a bit, and therefore we had to have, we had to request the policy board to give us the go ahead to the public meeting, so that's what we did. And so what our transportation improvement program, the one we're working on, is for the fiscal years 2025 to 2028. And in all of the projects that we that have gone through the process of design, environmental clearance, right of acquisition, what we typically end up doing is that if the project already has the committed and dedicated funding to it, we expect the projects to be designed environmentally clear, or at least getting very close to right of clearance, right of acquisition to be included in the TIP. And so each of the projects that are going to be implemented in the next 4 years are included in the TIP. And the most important part that I mentioned is that we have to have reasonable degree that the funds are fully committed to it. We end up developing our TIP every 2 years and we amend it annually. And so let's go to the next slide. And so one of the things that you might wonder is that why do we develop TIPs every 2 years, even though it's a 4-year document? The reason for that typically is that the state of Texas decided that in order to overlap will give us an advantage in understanding if there is any delay in the construction or the implementation, and also if anything changes in the scope of the project, what the project's limits or cost change over time, we can accommodate them better if we did them every 2 years. And so this is done because of statute that the state of Texas has passed. Previous TIP that we have been operating under was from the fiscal years 2023 to 2026, and the one you have in front of you is from 2025. Next slide. So the highway projects that are under construction were listed in the TIP, and those are the expected letting rate for these areas. And the I-35 4C project, which we are expecting to let in by 2025. The Twin Bridges project also in 2025, Spur 298 in 2026, and the State Highway 6 at 2027. The State Highway 31, which was in the current TIP, that we will not be including in this TIP of 2025-20 State Highway 31, because we are expecting this project to be led in FY26. These are the projects which are going to be in preliminary engineering and right of way acquisition that will be included in the TIP. And all of these projects that you see listed are expected construction of letting date is for fiscal year 2029 or beyond. So this State Loop 340, that's from US 84 to 484, and US 84 from 1695 to Spur 298. That's the Hewitt Drive to Valley Mills, not Valley Mills. Highway 6, and there is a little bit extra in there. US 84, the Boss Interchange area, and US 84 bypass, and also 317 from Blue Mountain Parkway to Monadette Parkway, and the FM 434, which is in the University Parks. So these are the areas which are going to be included in the current TIP for preliminary engineering and right of way acquisition. The highway projects, there are several highway projects that are booked, and we don't list them individually, and these are typically the projects where the expected work in preventive maintenance, we have safety, bridge replacement, landscape, and these are not listed individually. And the purpose behind it.
Greg Carpenter would like to say something real quick.
Ability to flexibly, perform the different states. TIP also includes public transportation projects, and so for us, it is either called Waco transit projects, and all the projects for transit are included for preventive maintenance, heavy expenses, operating expenses, short-range passenger amenities, and rural transportation. We do not necessarily cover them in the TIP; they are mostly for information purposes. That's what we use. And so here are the total costs that you can see. Preventive maintenance, about 6.5 million, ADA expenses 1.9, operating expenses of 9.8 million, short-range planning of 7.3, and passenger revenues to 272 for a total of 21 million. Next. So solicitation of comments began on March 31, and as I mentioned earlier, we had to speed up the process. That's why we have opened the public comment. We'll have a public information meeting on April 9th at 12 o'clock, as well as 5:30, and we'll bring it back to the Technical Advisory Committee for your review of the draft, along with the comments you received. And at that point in time, we'll request you to go ahead and adopt this step and make the recommendation to the policy board for the adoption. And we are expecting the policy board to act on it on May 16th. And so,
Okay, does anybody have any comments regarding the TIP? If not, can I have a recommendation to make a motion? Let me rephrase that. Can I have a motion to approve recommending this TIP plan to the policy board? Let me rephrase that a second time. We need a motion for open for comments. I'll make a motion. Anybody have a second? Okay, thank you, Jim. All in favor, say aye. Nay. Passes. So then we're going on to agenda item number 2, review and discussion for opportunities to leverage MPO work and grant opportunities for member governments.
So this is a very quick one. All of you are aware that we are getting very close to completing the comprehensive safety action plan. We have had several discussions with several different cities that are represented in the policy board, as well as smaller cities represented through the county and the rural parts of the county. One of the important points that we wanted to make is, so we had to speed up the timeline significantly on completing the comprehensive safety action plan, because we are trying to make every city in McLennan County eligible to apply for the implementation grant. And in order to do that, the implementation deadline or submission deadline for implementation grant under Safe Street for All program is May 16th. So what we have done is we have requested the policy board to call a special meeting for April 29th so that we could approve the comprehensive safety action plan and so that we can have every city eligible to apply for the implementation. And so that's the plan. However, that's only one of the grants that we can apply for. Once we have the projects ready, we can use this same project to apply for SIP funds or transition alternative funds, or there's another program, ATIIPs, has to do with alternative transportation improvement program that is federally funded, another discretionary fund. So what we're trying to do is that to get all the cities ready with the projects so that you can take advantage of all the different funding options that we have available to you. At this point in time, what typically happens is that barring some of the larger cities, smaller cities often do not have the resources to prepare the grant proposal and such. So with this comprehensive safety action plan, we are hoping that we can get most of the cities several projects that they get ready to go and to be submitted. And so most important, so if you have any question to us, please get to us as soon as possible so that we can get prepared with the implementation plan.
Who would we contact? You?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 3, review, discussion, and action regarding the 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plan call for proposals, evaluation criteria weights, and process.
So all of you have been involved in the development of our evaluation criteria for the last 6 months, and even prior to that, what process we're going to be following. But one of the important points we wanted to make, and we also have some very important discussions that we want to be engaged in today, is all the evaluation criteria that you will see us discuss have been discussed in formats over the last 6 months. But there have been several questions related to air and water quality and how we intend to include them in the discussion of the project evaluation. So what we have 3 experts, and in fact, there are several people here. Also done quite a bit of sustainability work in the process. And so we would like to have a rigorous discussion on that so that we're all on the same page about how do we address air and water quality concerns into the project themselves. And so far you can see that project solicitation, the red box is where we are now, March to July 2024. By the end of July, we will have these projects completed in their and evaluated so that we can start holding public meetings months of August to October. We plan to bring the proposals to or the ranked projects list to the policy board for their consideration at the meeting so that we can finalize the MTP January 2025. Next slide. And so this is what the process is going to look like. We have the framework that is drafted, evaluation criteria, rating that a lot of people participated. Thank you very much for that, because we had after 40 people on the policy board, technical advisory committee, and MTP steering committee, we have 29 of you completed, which is a fantastic result, by the way. And we have barely 8% margin of error on this evaluation rate. So this is really great. We're expecting the proposal to be completed by June, evaluation to be done by July, and then the projects are getting listed in the MTP. And some of the projects after, once we've identified the funding and they're designed to do, they will go into the next subsequent steps. Next slide. So this next, I'm sorry, go back a bit. Let's go through the dates. So March 25th is when it opened. April 4th is today. That's when we're discussing this. That's what we're going to shop. April 18th is when policy board will finalize the category weights. And May 2nd, we will have this discussion again. And June 21st is when the proposal closes. July, the entire month of July, the evaluation process. So this is what it looks like. Based on all the 29 input, you can see that economic development will end up with a weight of 14.02%. That's the highest weight among all the categories. Second point is the regional impact of 12.65, then the safety conflict point resolution 12.32. And after that, you can see facilitates connectivity, transportation resiliency, access to underserved populations. Those are quite important ones. One of the items that came up quite a bit in the discussions was that tourism-related traffic, non-motorized path elements, and comprehensive mobility solutions. And public transit, a lot of them actually ended up being less than the 10. What we also found interesting in this analysis was next slide. That these are the weighting exercises that Technical Advisory Committee did. So those are the light blue numbers, and the deep blue numbers are overall. So there is a slight bit of variation between what the Technical Advisory Committee weighted and what the policy weighted. And based on that differences, however, final category, in the final analysis, we will end up with weights of somewhere between 5% to 15%, highest being economic development, 15%, and lowest being non-motorized element of 5%. Next slide. So when we do this for all groups, this is what the graphs look like. Again, there is quite a bit of variation that reflects our differences in our opinion on what these categories are. And but I do want to go over the categories again, because in the project proposal, that's how they're going to be listed. The first category is non-motorized path element, that effectively sidewalk, bike lanes, shared paths, and such. Comprehensive mobility solution, in which we want people to be thinking not only about introduction of new facilities, but also taking of using technology to improve capacity and such. Conflict point resolution is entirely about safety, transit operations, and access improvement. We want all of us to think about how we are related to modes of transportation, including public transit. Transit facilitates connectivity. Is really about making sure that we don't end up with projects that go nowhere, but they actually legitimately connect points of interest that are important to us. Transportation resiliency is obviously very important. That we are experiencing far more extreme weather conditions, which requires that our transportation system is resilient. We also want to make sure that we address the inequities inherent in our mobility systems by improving access to underserved population. Economic development is normally ranks very high, but most of us seem to think very highly of it. Regional impact is also very important, that we want to fund projects that have high regional impact. And the last item is the tourism-related traffic in Waco, since we know that we actually receive more daytime tourist visitors than Alamo does. And so, in fact, we are one of the highest tourist destinations in the state of Texas now. And so, gradually, it has become quite important that we address the tourism-related traffic as well. So, those are the 10 categories. Each of those 10 categories have different subpoints. And if you have not had time to review the final evaluation instrument, please do, because we'll have another discussion on this at the next meeting. Slide. So at this point, there are two major things that I wanted to bring up and why it's so important for us to have this discussion. One is that we decided that the air and water quality, instead of treating them as a positive point, we want every project to be go through the lens of what impact will it have on the water and air quality. So we decided to put it as negative points. What it basically means is that if a project completely chooses to ignore air and water quality concerns, it could have maximum 10 points deducted evaluation. So in fact, in that sense, our most important motivation here really is that we want to make sure that every project discusses air and water quality impact that as detailed as possible. We are also lucky to have experts locally here. And so what I want to do is I would like to introduce Roger. Roger has worked for over 20 years handling the watershed management and residents in Austin area when Austin was starting to boom. So in many ways, one of the jokes we make about Roger is that, I got to Waco, and one of the first things I was told was that whatever we do, we don't want to be like Austin. And Roger is the person to talk about that. It's exactly, and this is what they all need, because Roger was dealing with exactly this problem while Austin was booming, and the kinds of responses people were making about the watershed, and the sort of messes that we have ended up because of having made some bad choices. So obviously, we want to make sure that we're going to avoid it. And so we are very fortunate. Roger is a very well-known expert in the area of watershed management. and he's done a lot of research, done a lot of work, both practical, academic, and theoretical work. And so I'll hand it over to Roger to talk about watershed quality in our area.
So, I want to just give a quick overview of what the watershed protection group in Waco does. We're responsible for drainage, for flood mitigation, flood control, and for stormwater quality. And part of the stormwater quality that everything in Waco ends up in somebody's drinking water. So when we talk about stormwater quality, we're also talking about drinking water. So that's the viewpoint that I kind of take with this. That was kind of the viewpoint in related to this. One of the problems in Austin, they were going through this. Their attitude was, if we don't build it, they won't come. Well, what happened is everybody went there, and now they're trying to catch up with the water industry on the roads because everybody went there. So it's good to figure out where are people going to go, and let's prepare for them in a rational way. So with that kind of background about what watershed does, there's a couple of things. Now, we go to the next slide. I'll refer back to this. So in the proposal, we've got your proposal negatively impact watershed management, and if it does, describe how you're going to mitigate that. And I want to talk about what those negative impacts are. So the first one is direct runoff. So you build a roadway, you're going to have direct runoff from the roadway into the drainage system. That'll mitigate that somehow. Whether it's roadside, and this is just the volume of runoff of this roadside ditches, what's happening in creeks and streams, things like that. That needs to be mitigated, just the direct runoff. And then you have the so you have the direct increase in runoff. The other part of it is when you have creek crossings, there's going to be flood impacts. If the crossings are not sized correctly or accommodate future growth, then you're going to create upstream flooding conditions and not designing to the 100-year storm, which is what everybody is required to design by FEMA. Then that creates issues if you're not designing your crossings correctly to account for that. So you have that that impact of the crossings that negatively impact the. There's also an indirect impact on flooding that we see sometimes. A lot of times when this put in. And this is more especially with the new roadway where it wasn't there before. Is you've changed the drainage pattern. So it may have been overland flow going in one direction, and put in the road next to down to another location. So you inadvertently move things from one drainage basin to another and create unknown flooding. We've seen that in Waco, where the roads were put in, and now we realize we're pushing water from one watershed to another watershed and have created a flooding problem in a watershed where the roadway is not even actually impacting it, but we just redirected the flow to that watershed. We inadvertently created an impact there. So that's something else we need to look at is what's the overall drainage pattern? Where is the water going? And where will it reroute with this in? On the water quality side, there's the impact of the roadway itself. So there's going to be runoff from the roadway, typical things that you see coming off the roads. There's heavy metals, things like that, solids, just the dust and debris that's associated with the roadway. The other thing you need to consider is what happens if there's a spill, and what happens if there's a spill in a critical area. If you have a spill and it's in an area where there's something fields on both sides, that's not an issue. What happens if you have a spill? It's very close to the waterway, without getting the waterway, becomes a major problem. So addressing those potentials is huge. The direct runoff is usually can be accomplished from some fairly easy things. I've seen look at just the roadside ditches do, and the length of the vegetative swale from the edge of the roadway to the center line of the swale is pretty good at cleaning up most of the stuff in roadways. There has been some work done where they do the permeable friction force on top, and that acts as a great filter system. It also makes water in the bodies and it's nice to be where the textile testing some of that in Austin. You can find the bottom. You could see from the blue spray the current point of view, all of a sudden comes, right? So it has a water quality benefit, but it also makes driving a little bit easier. There is an unintended consequence of water quality related to transportation. Once you make somewhere easier to get to, talk about this issues in Austin. Once you make it easier to get somewhere, people start moving out there. Now you're also having to account for more development on the land and change from a rural type of runoff scenario to an urban runoff scenario. So that would increase the amount of runoff that's coming up the streams. And there's also a decrease in water quality associated with people habitat, where people are living. You have higher runoff rates, increases in nitrates and things like that associated with it. So those are some of the things that need to be considered when somebody's designing roadway projects that could be the negative impact on.
There's some things, they did the next one that risk that it's not, I saw understanding that in McLean County, one of the major risks we always have. This. And so in case of extreme weather events, what are some of the ways that?
So some of the things with the weather related events and changing weather patterns is it's where we may say something is a 25 year has a 24% probability of happening in a year. Well, if weather patterns change from that type of rainfall is frequent, then now instead of happening 25 years with a 4% chance, maybe now it's happening more frequently. So that gives you that design for the bigger storms to try to account for this flash flood issues. I think a lot of flash flood deaths related to traffic, crossings, things like that. Right people will drive through low water crossings. We look at it and they'll say, "Oh, that's not too deep." From the car, 4 feet looks like 4 inches.
You know, what we're trying to do at the county level is place where the road just goes down, it's a low water crossing, creek rises, goes across, but people really don't know how deep it is. And so we're trying to improve that by raising the road up, putting box culverts underneath the road to allow the normal regular storms to pass through there, but also give signage beside the box culverts to show how deep the water is at that point, but also signage further away that flash. Once the water comes up, it makes a connection with electricity and then alert the signs to start flashing, people turn around, go around. So I did have a question. One of the things you mentioned previously about whenever, say, a farmer, he sprays his entire field with chemicals to reduce pests but increase production. But then that field gets sold and a development comes along, a large development, 500 to 1,000 homes. And you got to account for all the people's lawns. And they have these lawn treatment services that put chemicals on their lawns. Have you come across any studies that show that the after is less or more than the previous?
What I see in some of the work that I've done is the higher concentrations of some pesticides in urban areas. And primarily is when you've got farmers paying for that, there's an economic incentive to put on just exactly that amount. They don't put on more than they need to. When a homeowner goes to a home food store to buy a bag of fertilizer or any pesticide, the application rate regardless of the size of the yard, is one guy per bus. Because that's how much they have, and they'll put it all down. You know, the yard size of this table and the yard size of the room, they'll put down so you typically see higher levels of nutrients and pesticides. The other thing that you see that's not don't really think about it, you just see higher bacteria levels. And a lot of that isn't due to silicon and things like that. It's because we're really trying to get people to pick up their pet waste when they're walking their pet. Most people, even though they say they do,
Do you see an impact with the use of gray water from irrigation systems?
sure. I haven't seen enough.
Let me introduce Brian, because so that we can have even more conversation about environmental concerns. So, so with us, we also have Dr. Ryan McManameh. He's a professor at Baylor University and specializing in social ecology and human environmental interactions in the system. And what is exciting about his work is that he's directly interested in trying to figure out the land use, land cover map, and how the different kinds of development in urban areas end up affecting not only air quality, but a lot of it has to do with water quality as well. So he specializes in agricultural systems. And so we invited him to come and give us an idea about the air quality, but his work is actually largely in watershed area as well. So he's put in, so we're lucky to have him here in Waco to give us advice on how to think about some of these concerns. And so I'll hand it over to them.
Appreciate the invite to talk with you guys. Yeah, so that's a lot of what we do is we do currently land use, land cover modeling, have delved into urban landscapes. What does that mean for future projections of land cover? What does that mean for urban morphology? And a lot of this is Department of Energy funding, so it's relevance to future energy use. And so I'm not an air quality expert, and if anyone wants to talk with air quality experts, I can put you in contact with Rebecca Sheashley and Sasha Cinco in my department. So yeah, I took a little different slant with this as far as this proposal. I think it's really comprehensive proposal framework that you're developing proposed projects. So understanding the impact at that point is very difficult. Like, how do you know what's going to be an impact? And so what are some tools you can use without having architectural drawings and nobody get boots on the ground? Well, how do you even estimate these things? And so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about. So next slide. So first of all, what do we mean by air quality? I apologize if this is a review. But really in where we're talking about with air quality related to energy, which transportation is part of energy, it's combustion of fossil fuels, hydrocarbons. You've got a hydrocarbon with a bunch of hydrogen ions on it, big chains. They're combustible, they combust. Perfect scenario, it turns into CO2. So a complete combustion is you get a hydrocarbon turning into carbon dioxide and water. Now, the problem with that is there's incomplete combustion. And number one, most of the time, and also our fuels they're not completely hydrocarbons. There's other stuff in it. That's where you get some of the nitrous, you get sulfur dioxides. But when these things combust, the things that arise is either out of incomplete combustion or chemical reactions. So with heat, you're going to have, our atmosphere is a lot of nitrogen. That's where you get nitrogen oxides. You get under high heat, oxygen's combining with nitrogen, you get nitrogen oxides. Those create health issues. Incomplete combustion of these might comprise particulate matter that gets lodged in people's lungs. There's VOCs, volatile organic compounds that arise from this, and then ozone, which is really kind of a complicated thing. And then, so those are kind of the health impacts. Carbon dioxide is an inert gas. It's really not harmful, but it's a greenhouse gas, which is why EPA is concerned with it as well as different administrations. So next slide. So just to give you an overview, when I say particulate matter, you can see the relative size. That's a strand of hair. The PM, you'll hear it called PM, particulate matter 2.5. That's really, really small. PM10 is a little bit bigger. You're still talking about relative to the size of hair. So those things enter the lungs. They don't really, your lungs don't flush those out. So for construction work, you're inhaling dust, that can lead to long-term health implications. I've listed some of the health implications there. A lot of it's congestive heart failure, lung irritation. Air quality restrictions have really improved air quality over the long term. So the amount of health implications have gone down dramatically. Ground level ozone is pretty complex. That's where you have these pollutants. They get up and interact with sunlight. That frees oxygen that's really reactive, and that creates ozone. Ozone is a very massive pollutant. And so when we're talking about ozone, it's pretty natural in the upper atmosphere. We're talking about ground level ozone formation, and that only happens throughout the day. So you have a lot of heavy traffic in the morning. Get that the ozone formation occurs after a lot of sunlight in the middle of the day. There have been in the past. I mean, this is a perfect example of Donora, Pennsylvania, where you have large numbers of human mortality from an inversion where you have warm air trapping pollutants and leading to death. So it can be a consideration. I think in this context, it's any planning you're looking at things that could eventually surpass air quality constraints and thresholds, therefore leading to limitations. So that's where planning comes in important. You don't want development capped because we're getting up against thresholds. And so next slide, please. I'm just providing I'll be glad to provide links to a lot of these resources in a worksheet or something that people can go and look at. You can go and look at real-time air quality, or in the past, you can dig up past ambient air quality. When is air quality an issue? Next slide. So going back to the proposal, so does your proposal increase transportation emissions? And if yes, describe how you would mitigate these. And so some of those examples are provided. The question is, how do you estimate on the front end whether this is going to lead to some increase? And so next slide, please. So I kind of listed what are the challenges. That kind of helps you think through, first of all, it's really difficult to predict. These are, in a futuristic sense, what is an impact? How much is an impact? Why does it matter? We don't have time to do sophisticated modeling. It's not until really proposals go into action plans where that occurs, I think, right? And so the idea is having tools that are easy to use and learning how to make assumptions when you can. And so what I'm proposing here is just some tools to do that. So next slide. So this is what would happen, I think, in many different MPO offices of what a sophisticated transportation plan might look like. You've got a city scale proposed plan. We want infill development, economic development. That goes into a travel demand model, which is commonly used. And then that helps you determine, okay, how much amount of travel are we going to have and what those travel services look like? Like how many person trips, average trip lengths, vehicle, miles traveled. The services look like average speed. Are we cutting down congestion? That is entered into an air quality model, mobile 6, mobile 5 model. It spits out the air quality issues. So again, this is a complex model. It's like, this is a lot to do in a proposal. We can't do that. But what we can do is we can take some of the things that will influence the outcomes and maybe portion those. So that's the next slide, into maybe a checklist approach. So if you're looking at a plan where you're putting in, let's look at a bigger roundabout, or let's look at a new intersection, a new corridor. Is that going to increase or decrease the person trips? Is that going to increase or decrease our average trip length? Vehicle miles traveled. These are things where we have pretty coarse coefficients to translate that into air quality, or to the amount of emissions that you're probably going to be looking at. And so I think a well-rounded proposal may consider these things, perhaps, like, in whether you're considering all these, is it non-automobile transportation that it's fostering, or bus transportation, public transportation? And then if you think it's going to increase or decrease, what's the justification? On the flip side, the next slide is maybe considering mitigation, tree plantings. How much is that? Or renewable energy offsets. Local, sometimes in the energy industry, if they can't really, if a new plant can't do much to mitigate impacts, agencies will be like, you know what, we need another monitoring station because these are expensive to run. Maybe put up a new monitoring station for the price of mitigation. You're like, this is a good trade-off. If you consider an electric vehicle, charging, etc. So the next slides, and I'm sorry to PowerPoint you guys to death, but maybe next slide is, okay, how, if we have these rates, if we think we have this proposed plan and it's going to decrease the amount of miles traveled, or it's going to increase the people on the road, but it's going to decrease congestion, how might we start estimating the benefits of that and the emissions? That's where these online calculators come in. There's carbon calculators, where you can estimate miles traveled, hours on the road, and it'll give you outputs. These are first order approximations. And next slide, you can get after greenhouse gas emissions. There's equivalency calculators. Again, I'll provide links to all this. Next slide, please. If you really want to get into vehicle emissions by type, you know what mixture of vehicles you're going to have on the road. Light duty versus heavy duty vehicles by miles traveled, even projections in the future of how technologies are likely to change. Bureau of Transportation Statistics provides that in tables, so you can look it up and say, okay, we expect this many less trucks on the road in this area, and this is the amount of NOx emissions that are going to come out per mile. We can reduce it, or it may increase this much. Okay, so this is just estimating impact. If you want to try to look at mitigative solutions, next slide, you can say, well, how many trees do I need to plant? So if you have this many expected increase in CO2 from vehicles on the road, how many trees do I need to plant to mitigate that? Trees sequester CO2 and produce O2. You can use online calculators to do that. Even estimating the size of the solar array. And how does that work? Well, if you're installing a solar array, that's offsetting coal or natural gas production. So you're assuming you're taking less energy off the grid for coal and natural gas, then that's an offset. You can say, well, we're increasing this much, but we're replacing CO2 this much. So there's a way you could estimate that using calculators. I don't know if I have another one on here. So slide. This is it. So that's it. Again, I'll provide these links, but I think very quick, rapid approaches to sort of think through what are impacts, how they, and I think for what Roger was doing too, there's tools for water quality as well.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And so one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page is that we're not necessarily expecting that the project is going to be so fully designed and engineered that we will be able to precisely estimate what the air quality or what the impact is going to be. What we want to make sure is that right from the beginning, we have the tools available for us so that we can think systematically about what kind of air water quality impact should we be expecting from this project. And if we're anticipating any major negative impact, then we also want to start integrating what the mitigation strategies need to look like. So thank you so much for that. And I think both Roger and Ryan are here for, so if you have any questions, you can channel them through the MPO staff and we can get them to answer some of the questions. But we just want to make sure that we have a very robust discussion on the issues, especially because in our experience at the MPO, one of the things we have realized is that when we ask people about that these new resiliency risks that we are constantly experiencing with climate change and the changes in the weather variations, most people agree that we need to do something about it. But the problem often is that what do we do? And that typically is not necessarily that clear front. So we want to make sure that that we want to ease up that process of that burden. So that when we're considering these things, it does not look like a major insurmountable challenge that we process. So,
Well, I had a question for you. Is there like a rule of thumb on, say, if 10,000 more people move to the city, how much effect that has, or maybe it's for 100,000, I don't know, but, and then also, we talk about trees, planting trees. Whether the trees are planted in the city where the pollution is, or the periphery of the city, or can just having some shrubs and more green space help as well?
Definitely, you know, for like, if you, these kind of general rules of thumb, if you have this many people move in, you know, you can do kind of, there are household calculators. One of that was a household calculator for like, it's hard for all the other emissions. You just don't have good total estimates on those, but like CO2 is always, there's so many estimators for that. So if you have this many people moving in or living in a, 2.5, or 3.5 size family living in this square foot house, how much can we expect? Or people are living in more apartments, how much do we expect? And so those kind of things can be calculated with pretty, in a first order, what I call back of the envelope calculations, you can do pretty quick. And they're pretty easy. And, these tools make them easy. But then also like how much that tree calculator, you could say, okay, well, we've got this much more CO2. How many trees, what kind of vegetation do we need to plant? How much of it? What age should it be? How much is it going to cost? Those are all, again, back of the envelope. Like those can be estimated pretty quickly. And by quickly, I mean sitting down, once you know where to go. That's the other thing. That's half the battle. It's looking at where do I look for this thing. But once you know where to go and you do that stuff like 30 minutes to an hour, sitting down and thinking about it, it gets you a long way.
Anybody else have any questions or discussion? Well, thank you all both for attending and providing your insight.
Sure. So part of this, we also want to make sure that clarify that. So there are a few changes that have happened with this MTP compared to previous MTP. So some of you have experience of getting a project by simply making a phone call to the MPO staff and say that there is a project that we would like you to consider, and MPO they put in good, and we don't want to do that. And so we want to actually take the MPO staff out of the equation of receiving and evaluating projects entirely. So what we are doing is that we are expecting the way this process is going to look like is that every project that needs to be included in the MTP has to have a city that is the primary sponsor of the project. If the project is on TxDOT right of way, we are expecting the city to not only be in touch with TxDOT, but work together with TxDOT district and to consider what this project is going to look like for submitting it. And that's what we're saying, that it is the sponsor's responsibility to complete the proposal form. And we're going to do the intake and decision lens and that we have talked about before. And at the MPO staff, we're more than happy to walk you through the decision lens process and what it's going to look like. And what we would like each sponsor to do is have a meeting with TxDOT ahead of the submission, make sure that the application actually complies with TxDOT district standards and such. But even most importantly, what we want to make sure is that right from the beginning of when we think of a project, all the way to identifying the funding, the city, TxDOT, and the MPO need to have regular discussion and update on each other. Because in the past, we have repeatedly seen complaints, sometimes justifiably, sometimes unjustified entirely, that there have been no communication. And what our understanding is that, in fact, we simply need a formal structure to make sure that it does happen. Because new people come in, some people go in, we tend to have very short memories about these things. And so we want to make sure that all of this gets done in a formally structured process. And so the most important part we want to emphasize, there are two very important ones. One is a city must take initiative to propose a project. Work with TxDOT if it is a TxDOT right of way, An MPO will convene the meetings, facilitate the meeting, will organize and schedule all these meetings and facilitate it. And at the same time, it is the responsibility of the city to complete this project application form. We don't expect this project application form to be extremely burdensome. And that's one of the reasons why we invited Brian and brought him to come speak about this completely new part. Everything else is actually something that you all have been doing for all along. The only new item we have introduced this time is really the trying to measure the exact air quality and water quality impact. And so we are trying to provide as much resource as possible, but we also understand that this is the conceptual level of the project, and therefore we're not going to have very highly developed, fully fleshed out models. And so we just want the first order estimations of what the impact are going to be, so that we can continue with this conversation. And as the project develops, then we'll have better idea of what the impacts are going to be, what the mitigation strategies need to look like. So that's what we had. And if there is any question, next. There, we can answer that. But the most importantly, I can't say it enough. Until now, the practice has been that you pick up a phone call and call the MPO. And we don't want to do that. Because that typically meant that there was no rhyme or reason why this one project got considered, another project didn't. We want to make sure that every project that has a legitimate reason to be included and considered gets considered as part of this NTP process. Every project that is going to be proposed is going to be evaluated. And based on the financial constraint that we project, we will have how outcome is going to look like a prioritized list of projects, which then TxDOT has clarity on which project to prioritize to allocate preliminary planning and specification funding from the beginning, and which one to be
All right, so I believe we need to have a recommendation to the policy board. We need a motion to adopt the MTP proposal framework and evaluation criteria. Do I have a motion? Okay, Mitch, got a motion. Andy seconded. All in favor? Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? It passes. Okay, now we'll move on to agenda item number 4, discussion and updates on the current grants, which include Safe Streets for All, RAISE, and Smart Grants.
So very quickly, we wanted to let you know that FY 2022 is going along as much faster than what we wanted to, because of the deadlines that SS Federal Administration has set up. So we are expecting to have the preliminary CSAP completed and adopted by the Policy Board under the FY 2022 grant on April 29th. We will, however, update it and do an amended plan that we expect Policy Board to adopt in the month of June. FY 2023, we just sent the first completed draft agreement with Federal Higher Administration, so we expect to get started on that on July 1. That's the tentative date, starting date with that project, and that's the project in which we plan to do several demonstration projects across McLean County in different locations. And if I can just jog your memory on that, major locations are Valley Mills Drive from Cops all the way to Zagby, and also the Saul Avenue corridor, Loop 340 between US 84 and I-35, Hewitt Drive between Panther and Regal. Am I missing?
Did you mention Robinson?
In Robinson, the US 77, thank you. US 77 just south of the Loop 340, where there have been several safety challenges there, so we want to do a safety demonstration project there as well. So that's the one that will get started on July 1. We'll spend about 6-7 months designing what those demonstration projects need to look like, and we'll hold public meetings related to that in these locations, and then we'll implement the demonstration project, collect the data, and that will give us an idea of whether those demonstration projects need to turn permanent or whether they need to if they need to be removed, then we can move them. The RAISE grant is also, we are about to send in the first draft of the agreement. And once it is done, how one of the important points that I did want to make about the raise grant is that unlike some of the other grants where you get the grant, we had consultants to do most of the work. With the raise grant, we decided that it needed a little slower approach to it. And so we have made agreement with the Cyber Law Clinic at Harvard Law School, as well as Center for Transportation Research at UT Austin, to take a bulk of the research work and take the lead in that regard. We also have been in touch with Design Lab at University of Maine, which does a lot of design work for related design work in transportation systems. And so we will try and bring them into the discussion as well as part of the Smart Network Corridor. Because the idea throughout is that why invest in any of these technology if they're not in. And so we want to use that, and that will get started. That part of it has already started, but bulk of it will we expect to start sometime in summer. We did not, the bad news, we did not get the smart grant that we applied for, and this was for improving the bike pedestrian activity on 4th and 5th Street under I-35. But we have not given up on that. We'll probably go ahead and go through and get the feedback, revise the application, and we send it for and we will send it. Those are all the items.
We'll move on to agenda item number 5, discussion and updates from the TxDOT regarding significant highway construction in the Waco metropolitan area. Blake?
Sir. First project should be Spring Valley. Big thing here is we're looking to switch traffic actually next week between Old Temple and Cuban Drive. Looking at next Wednesday, tentatively for that day, communicating with the city, with the school there. A couple of side streets will be impacted for a couple of weeks, just due to grade changes, but still on target for that fall into 2024. Our 434 U Parks widening. The big focus here is just the bridge at Primrose Creek. We are actually working on expediting some works. We can get the second lane open across the bridge prior to the eclipse on Monday. So we're expecting to have that lane open up actually tomorrow. Maybe some temporary closures after that to complete the remaining work of the bridge, but still on target for that in 2024. State Highway 6 Modal Mall, if you want to go ahead and scroll to the picture. Here at Bagby, currently working on the signal cutovers. That work will be ongoing for the next couple of weeks. Get full signals removed, signals activated, complete the island and beacon. Moving to the west, bulk of the work here is really clean up, getting permanent sod down, general cleanup. Here at the Beverly Bridges, these 2 U-turns are actually on schedule to be open tomorrow. Completing some pavement work, some of our concrete rail, curb and gutter, but we can expect those U-turns to be open tomorrow. To the west, around the industrial imperial area, it's primarily cleanup, sod, some riprap. Imperial U-turns. The one on the left-hand side of the page, it's currently open. We've got some weekend closures coming up to complete some of the concrete work there. Closure on the opposite side of the railroad track, or the U-turn on the opposite side of the railroad track. And then at 84, again, it's just general cleanup in the series. Roughly probably another month or so of work remains here and be out of the way. A couple of projects to note that are coming up. We've got a State Highway 6 Mill and Inlay project. It starts at 1860 in Riesel. Actually moves down to the Robertson County line. It's a pretty long project. We're going to start mid-April, and it'll run through the end of the calendar year. Then we've got an overlay project that's on Bellevue Drive from the interstate up to roughly 84, and then on the loop from 3051 over to Williams Drive. It will start that one April 15th. There'll be a combination of day and nighttime work. A lot of that will wrap up.
You might have any questions about that?
Like, are you
like the rest of the group is mid-15, but the one that is coming up shortly is connected automated vehicle work group, April 17, 2024. And this April 17th meeting is important for a couple of other immediate reasons. One of which is that before the end of this year, we are expecting, or at least that's the schedule, the TxDOT to give the MPO the go-ahead with the levy funding, which would typically need about $1.8 million in charging infrastructure funding. If that's available, then we need to start planning for that. What the locations for the privatization needs to look like, etc. And so this meeting, as well as the next meeting, are going to be because in these two meetings, we want to have as much clarity about it as possible. And what we're expecting is to develop a white paper prior to the second meeting so that we can direct that investment as appropriately as possible, and also include that as part of the transition plan.
Okay. We'll then move on to agenda item number 7, MPO monthly report.
So we have completed all the meetings regarding the comprehensive safety action plan with MPO member governments. We are soliciting public comments for the 2025-28 TIP that we just spoke about. The waiting exercise is completed, which we just voted on, and we have opened the call for the 2050 MTP. And for 2024 SS4A update, the old one. So far we have heard from 3 cities in the area which intend to apply for implementation grant, with the city of Waco, city of Belle Meade, and city of McGregor. We have not heard from any other city yet about, but that does not mean that they're not getting ready. As they get ready, just know that if your staff is here, we cannot write the application for you. However, we have gone through the process several times, and so we can walk you through the different documents and what you need to do to prepare for that. That's related to FY 2024 SS4. One more item related to that, and we do intend to write another application at the MPO for doing a sign inventory project for the county, and we will expect any city that wants to be included as part of the project. We just need to let us know that you want to be included. Some cities, simply because they do this work on their own, like such as city of Waco, when city of Robinson had its own sign inventory, they may not be interested in being part of it, but any city that is interested in being part of it, we would like to include them in it. We will submit this proposal at the MPO and the county for the sign inventory. The last item that we wanted to introduce you. So we have started preparing ourselves for the public meetings we will be doing related to our long-range planning process. In order to prepare for that, we decided that it was time for us to move forward in spite of my extreme trepidation, I guess, on social media, but we do have some very capable members on the team to walk us through the process. And so here are some of the examples that we have. And Daniela and Nora, or Arthur, is there anything you might want to add to what we're doing with the social media accounts?
If you're not comfortable sharing your picture, please let us know so that way we can post you guys or.
Yes, that part is really important because that's one of the ways that we want to not only let people know what MPO does, so that during the public meeting on long-range planning, we're not spending all the time simply trying to tell them what MPO is. We actually want to get into the plan itself and not keep trying to explain what MPO is. And so that's part of. So we want to be able to cover some of those up front, and that's why we have started our social media portion. We are also working on a story map to make sure that there's plenty of detail about how these processes happen, who does what at what point in time, with examples, and so that we're trying to orient everybody into what the MPO does, what the planning process looks like, so that during the public meetings we can actually talk about the plans and not just you exactly. Yeah. One last thing which just happened since we did this big announcement. So if the 2023 data are correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the Hewitt Drive between US 84 and Sun Valley. There is a fair chance that this may end up being state of Texas 100 most congested roadway segments. And if that happens, that list is important because TxDOT Commission pays very close attention to 100 most congested roadway segment. And so, so we have preliminary data in 2023. It is still getting reviewed and finalized, but if that happens, then we will have Hewitt roadway segment between 84 and Sun Valley as one of the top 100 most congested roadway segment. And that would effectively mean that cities of Woodway, city of Waco, city of Hewitt, and the TxDOT, we might want to start thinking about that area even more seriously than what we have been. I mean, we have spent a lot of time thinking through that area. It's not like it's not been on the radar, but it will basically bump it up. That's a high priority project. So that's all.
So now we're on to agenda item number 8, announcements. Next meeting will be Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. And we will there. So the next tax meeting is, like I said, Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. And the next work group meetings, as Mukesh just said, the connected and automated vehicle Wednesday, April 17th, pedestrian Wednesday, May 15th. And request for agenda items for future meetings.
Sarah, I have location for the cap.
Yes, we're meeting at 401 Franklin. What time are we?
Wait,
10 a.m. In the main conference room. And we will make sure that I think you all are also on the list, mailing list on it. And so you should receive, if you haven't already received, you should receive the invitation for the meeting.
So do we get any funding for that name, image, and likeness website?
no, but they, you're.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, please do let us know if you're not comfortable with that at all, because this is part of it. Our social media campaign, we want to put as many visual images of our meetings, etc. as possible.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up? Well, thank you all for attending. We really appreciate your presence here, and we will be adjourned. You're welcome.